The reason why I'm quite proudly anti-woke is because I feel that woke as a thing, it has an abusive dynamic. It makes you feel bad for the things you think, the things you do, and who you are. What would be nice is if the media could simply not have an agenda and just report on the fact that here are some far-right thugs. Could we have similar outrage for the peace marches every weekend post-October the 7th, in which anti-Jewish slogans have been projected onto the Houses of Parliament?
Why didn't the Olympics then, if they were going to do a kind of, okay, drag is the new way forward or whatever that might mean, why didn't they do some sort of Prophet Muhammad thing?
We know why. No other religion would be subjected to ridicule like that on a global stage. You should mock Christianity, but only if you can mock the other religions. We don't have blasphemy laws in this country.
If you were really going to do this, I mean, Salman Rushdie did it 20 years ago with Satanic Verses. You know, that's really taking a risk.
Correct.
Isn't this nice?
Nice to be in a really dark black studio. I feel like we're committing a crime or something.
Yeah, we should. Oh, don't tell them what we've been doing just before.
Do you know this is like where you plan a heist, isn't it?
It is that kind of place, isn't it? It is sort of bank and an open thing.
Yeah. What we need is a sort of some diagrams of a vault.
Yeah.
And then someone comes out with a pencil and draws a line and says, there's the safe. Barry, you got to open the safe.
George Clooney, come in.
Yeah.
This is a new table. We just set this up an hour ago. What do you think?
It's a beauty. It's solid wood, isn't it? Let me just give it a quick lift. Yeah, it weighs a ton. Or I'm weak.
And we're both very tall. And I don't think either of us knew that about one another before we met the other day.
No, I'm 6'5", although I've never felt tall. And the reason why is because I was of an average height until about the age of 14.
Whoa.
Then I had a growth spurt and I became very tall. But I never felt tall because most of my life up to that point, I'd been a regular sized guy.
Interesting.
And so it tells you so much about what you actually are and what you perceive are two very different things.
You're the only tall person with small man syndrome.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
Which is why I'm in the media.
You're a terrier.
I'm very inadequate, and therefore I have to have approval from people that don't know me, who are looking at me on a screen. That's all I crave. Oh, I don't need the people that know me to like me.
No.
Such as my wife or children or immediate friends. It is the approbation of absolute strangers that I crave.
Gosh, isn't it interesting? Because you talk obviously joking, but there is some of that in all of us who do this kind of job.
Well, there might be a bit of that because actually back in the day I did more stand-up. I still do stand-up, but just less because I've been busy with broadcasting. And my favorite gigs are the ones where I just know that there isn't anyone in the crowd that knows me personally, and then I can be free.
Yeah, because then they'll go like, that's not what... He was just in the bathroom this morning doing all sorts of noises. That's not the guy.
In fact, I can't even talk to a member of the audience before I go on, because if they're in the front row, I then can't talk to them because they're in the circle of trust already. They're an actual person that I'm going to have empathy for because I chatted to them beforehand. Yeah. So I need, that anonymity. And what it is for a comedian, anonymity is a cloak in which you can be as outrageous as you like, because the point is that they don't know you, well, you don't know them. And because you don't know them, you can say outrageous things about them because it's not based on information that you have about them. And therefore they know you're joking, basically.
I've got an interesting segue then, because you were speaking recently, a video of yours did really well. Of course, I think
was it pornographic by any chance?
That one was. Okay, I'll talk about the other one then.
Let me tell you, I'm tall, but that's not where it stops.
Yeah. What does that mean?
I'm blessed with pretty potent genetics.
Really? Mm-hmm. With regards to the act of coitus?
Let's not get into, but my anatomy is, Are
you that high jumper?
Well, let me just say it pays the bills.
Did you see the high jumper?
It sells itself. I did see the high jumper, and that was just brilliant, wasn't it?
That can't have actually been his Willy.
Oh, what do you think? Was it doping or something?
I don't know. It must have been like a cup or something. It was just too large.
Well, speak for yourself. I don't know. I'd call that sort of rather diminutive, to be quite honest with you.
Just don't. Well, in that case, don't. That's why you're not a high jumper. You would have been brilliant.
It's basically this guy has crashed and burned as an athlete and is now an absolute rock star in the real world.
For those who don't know, this was the high jumper who got over the pole, but one part of his anatomy didn't get over there and seemed extraordinarily large to bring the pole down.
It was probably the first time in history when a man didn't want to have a big willy.
Damn this thing. Why did I get the enlargement jabs? It's ruined my high jumping career. This must have happened to him in training as well. I mean, if you do that, you must, as a high jumper, you must do it a million times.
I just wonder whether it's a humble brag.
Oh, he knew what he was doing.
He's like, what's better, having a medal or being the world's most eligible bachelor?
I think so. He just lost his girlfriend. His girlfriend left him for someone else. He wanted to show that new guy what was missing.
I mean, he's not the only one who's, it affects all of us. I have to actually really think carefully about how I sit down. So, the guy's not alone. I feel his pain.
It's interesting that, and I've always found high jumping very easy. I've had no issues anatomically. Speaking of that, wonderful segue to the Olympics, this video you did recently, it chimed with people, didn't it? About the French doing this kind of Last Supper. I've now heard people saying it wasn't the Last Supper, it was something, some sort of pagan god routine.
Or can we jump straight into that?
Yeah. Well.
Because being told it wasn't the Last Supper is what many on the progressive left do, which is to tell you it's not happening when it's happening, right? It's that I hate using the word gaslighting because like woke, it's become such a cliche. It's often shorthand also for lazy commentary. But it was the iconography of the Last Supper. It's the most famous painting in history, and they replicated it at the Olympics, which is the biggest sporting event in the world, with a trans. Was it a trans? No, it was a drag act in the middle as Jesus Christ. So, I mean, I think this heaps offense on offense to essentially, use the iconography of that famous painting, and then say that that's not what the iconography was. It's an insult to our intelligence, and it shows how shameless these people are.
What's that Orwell quote, Mark Dolan? What was the Orwell quote?
That's my favorite one. I might get a tattoo of it on my face, written the wrong way around so that when I look in the mirror, it makes sense. Perfect. Like ambulance. You were told, along the lines of you were told not to believe your eyes and ears. It was the last and most important instruction of the party type thing.
Yeah.
But that's because I'm not George Orwell, it wasn't quite as elegantly put as.
The party told you to reject the evidence. For those who are just listening and can't see me looking at my iPad, I just want you to know this is in my head. I've got it remembered. The party told you to reject the evidence of your eyes and ears. It was their final, most essential command. I think you got it pretty good, actually.
Yeah. And so this, I mean, it's actually, let's not get sucked into it if you don't want, because we'll stay on the Olympics, because I'm a very tangential individual, partly because of the enormous amount of prescription medication that I'm currently on.
Yeah.
But,
is that right?
No. If only.
Yeah.
This energy isn't natural. No. This is Colombian energy, let me tell you.
I saw you wearing the Medellin football shirt the other day.
It's like the peace marches that we've seen every weekend in the aftermath of October the 7th. Now, you can debate all day long what the message of those marches is. We can all agree we want the death and suffering in Gaza to end. That's uncontroversial. But for people to be told that from the river to the sea is not anti-Semitic is, again, redolent of that same impulse that says that the scene in the Olympics was not the Last Supper. It's just you're literally bending yourself over backwards to gaslight people who are being abused and tell them that they're not being. And I find the reason why I'm quite proudly anti-woke is because I feel that woke as a thing, it has an abusive dynamic because it makes you feel bad for yourself. It makes you a bad person for the things you think, the things you do, and who you are. I mean, if it's based on skin color, if you've got to feel bad for being white, that is an abusive dynamic. Now, if you're a white person that kills people, then you are bad. But if you're a white person that just sort of has a job, works maybe as a painter and decorator and has 2 kids and goes to Tenerife once a year, then you're not ticking the box of a bad person, are you? So, but this is what woke does, is it demonizes people, it makes people feel bad. And that's what an abuser would do in a relationship. If someone said, you can't say those things, your opinions are unacceptable, you're a bad person because of immutable characteristics. Well, that would be, if you went to any counselor, they'd be like, well, this is a domestic abuse situation. But this is what's happening in society, and it's got to be fought. That's why I fight it. So yeah, sorry, forgive the rant, but the Last Supper thing, I did do a monologue about it, and it was on my GB News show, which is called Mark Dolan Tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. And let me tell you, and let me surprise you by saying, I didn't have a problem with the scene at the Olympics per se.
Are you Christian?
I was raised Roman Catholic.
Mm-hmm. Are you a believer?
I'm not a religious person.
Okay.
But any more than, if I go further than that, I will upset my mother.
Oh, no. Well, let's not. Let's end the interview now. In these crazy times, there is peace of mind in security. Security for our country, security for our leaders, and security for our families. But think about this. You are not financially secure if you have all of your eggs in one basket. Gold and silver are an excellent way to diversify your savings. They're a hedge against inflation. They're a physical asset that is in high demand globally from the wealthy to central banks. And through my friends at Birch Gold Group, today's sponsor, you can own physical gold and silver in a tax-sheltered retirement account. That's right, you can diversify an old IRA or 401k for no money out of pocket into an IRA in gold and silver. This is one thing you can do to secure your family's savings. Text Heretics to 989898 and receive a free no-obligation info kit and learn the role precious metals play in your overall savings strategy. Again, text Heretics to 989898. With an A+ rating in the Better Business Bureau and thousands of happy customers, you can trust Birch Gold like I do. Text Heretics 989898 or go to birchgold.com/heretics.
But what I will say is that, so therefore I'm not a religious person. I suppose you could call me non-religious. But so with regards to the Last Supper scene, I've got no problem with it at all. I mean, look at the life of Brian. It's Jesus Christ on a cross singing, okay? Which ironically, the Christian right, when it was released, tried to get it banned, sort of did get it banned, didn't they? In doing exactly what the woke left are doing now. So, you know, it's basically a bit of a come full circle situation. So I had actually zero problems with it. And I don't think most people did. It was the fact that no other religion would be subjected to ridicule like that on a global stage at the biggest sporting event there is. And if you had such iconography being sort of pastiched and mocked up and mocked, whether it was Judaism, Islam, anything else, Hindu, it wouldn't happen. And that's because for some reason, Christianity is a soft touch. You're allowed to attack it. You're allowed to mock it. And I believe in that. You should mock Christianity. You should mock, Catholicism, all the rest of it, but only if you can mock the other religions.
Yeah. Is there also a tiny bit, I suspect in you, certainly I have this in me, of, and it's an ego thing, but I feel like a contrarian. I feel like a rebel without a cause. I know that's pathetic, and everyone listening is going to, what a pathetic thing. But I do, and I felt like that since I was 15. I can imagine the one who stands up and said, takes the risk and gets kicked out of the class at school.
Yeah.
And now we're seeing people dressing up as though they were rebels, but taking aim at the easiest target that's not going. There's no cost.
Bingo.
Whereas it's like, if you were really going to do this, I mean, Salman Rushdie did it 20 years ago with Satanic Verses. That's really taking the risk.
Correct, exactly. And that man is just a total hero and so courageous. I mean, he almost paid with his life. He certainly paid with his health following a more recent attack. And he's paid with his career. The guy had armed security for at least a decade after publishing a book which wasn't even controversial. It was just because of things that were referenced in it more than anything else.
There's a few pages that were a bit bad.
Maybe a bit edgy.
About Muhammad. Even repeating it on the podcast, we'll both be finished.
Big guy.
Because they killed like the translators. It was like a Japanese translator of the book was killed.
Well,
so,
it's a shocker. So therefore that was it really. I was quite triggered by, but the great misunderstanding is not that Christianity is sacred and that you shouldn't be doing that. I do think it's strange to have that kind of satire at an event which is designed to bring the world together. I think invoking religion at all shows how the extent to which the people organizing those Olympics have lost the plot, because actually there's no place for any religion there. Unless it was, imagine if you've got sort of a parade and along the parade you have Muslims and then you have whatever, Christians and Jews. But that's not even how the Olympics works, is it? It's the countries that have their little moment, and it's like, here comes the United Kingdom and here comes Spain. And, so why there was religion there at all is beyond me. But the fact that it focused exclusively on Christianity tells you everything you need to know. The West is bad, of course. The West is shameful. It's post-colonial. And therefore, the legacy religion of the West, which is Christianity, is bad too. So it's all open target. And, the West being bad is going some in terms of warping reality.
Yeah.
Given the fact that the United Kingdom alone gifted the world representative democracy, free markets, art, culture, and we ended slavery, which took decades and cost millions and a lot of lost blood as well, So, but we're bad, apparently. We also defeated fascism in 2 separate world wars, but we're bad. Make it make sense.
Spice Girls.
Well, and the thing is, that's, Jerry was crossing the line, I do think. That is
I remember that being a big deal as a kid. That's why that popped into my head of like, who can break America? Robbie Williams, doesn't seem to be big in America. And the Spice Girls did it. And I thought, that's an export that we have.
Well, yeah. And by the way, the West has done so many bad things. I mean, the West has indulged in war nonstop throughout its entire existence. So, I'm not going to sort of suddenly offer this unbalanced partisan view of the West as such. Of course not. But it's just that every nation is just drenched in blood, unfortunately, because human beings fight each other for goods and territory. And but my point is that, the West, this is where the democracies are. This is where you can have Pride Month. Mm-hmm. It's where gay men can marry and be respected and treated under the law as a married couple, etc. And therefore, this sort of attack on our values and everything. I mean, you should interrogate our history. Slavery was the single greatest crime against humanity, and we participated in that and made money from it. But of course, we know that every nation and every empire also participated in slavery and everything. So it's not a case again of being reactionary and jumping on the other side. The West has multiple and unending, infinite crimes, but this war on the West is so insidious because what you're doing is you're attacking nations that well, I mean, in the end, if it's a democracy, it's better than a dictatorship, isn't it? So why woke progressives focus on the UK and how terrible we are and not China, which segregates its own people, does ethnic cleansing, has no human rights, and millions of its population are living grinding poverty, plus the pollution and everything else, anyway.
Well, that goes back to our point before. I mean, they don't seem to take aim at anybody who actually firstly is deserving of it, but anyone who might fight back. It's fear. So yes, Christianity, easy. The West, easy. But maybe they don't want to criticize China because what might China do?
Why don't woke progressives tweet all the time about Iran and how women are treated there?
It's so bizarre,
and who are murdered for not wearing, covering their heads. And what's happened to the Western feminists on that one?
And why didn't the Olympics then, if they were going to do a kind of, okay, drag is the new way forward or whatever that might mean, why didn't they do some sort of Prophet Muhammad thing? Well,
we know why.
Yeah. So that would have been the actual, if they were rebels. Otherwise, Christian, again, look, you're a comedian. What an easy mark that is, Christianity. How boring. What a boring thing to do. Do something that,
Yeah, I mean, you could, what I try to do all the time in my job is I try to look at the other side. Because any argument that's made that doesn't consider the other side is unintellectual and it's misleading. And so therefore you've got to just anticipate and, think. When I talk about Brexit, I mean, I voted Remain, but in my view, Brexit is like that. There's been no disaster.
Yeah.
The
UK
sort of shrugged it off really. And we're currently sitting at the top of the G7 for economic growth. So, the catastrophe that was predicted didn't happen. So I'm a Remainer, but I just can immediately see that but when I talk about Brexit on my show, I point out that it's had a cultural impact. Young people can't just go and make a new life in Italy or France or something.
Yeah.
And plus it's been merry hell for small businesses trying to export goods, So sometimes, you make a mistake if you're so keen to make your argument that you omit the other side in order to win that argument. And I actually would rather weaken my argument with some facts that contradict what I've got to say, because then I think that's where you get the authority, because then it's like, well, actually he's acknowledged the other argument, but here's his view. And I think that's how you win hearts and minds personally. And that's why tribal stuff doesn't work, because it's just sort of you bad, me good. So I try not to participate in that. So with regards to the, going back to the Olympics and stuff, it would be really nice if we could mock all religions. But if we can't mock all religions, we shouldn't mock any.
Yeah.
It's just not, it's not fair. It's not right. But by the way, if you can't mock all religions, that's a very dark place. And that's why these so-called culture wars are real, is because actually, if you can't mock a religion like Christianity or Islam, well, then that is, by the back door, a blasphemy law. And we don't have blasphemy laws in this country. But now, de facto, in reality, we do.
We do.
So if people say these are confected culture wars from the right, it's not true. This is a change in our country. It's a change in the values of our country and how we live. If you can't take the mick of a religion, no one voted for that. And that isn't legislation that went through Parliament.
For non-Brits, take the mick means mock, just in case.
Yeah.
If they don't know. But no,
I'm so down to earth, aren't I? I'm such a cockney.
Do they use that in Let me know in the comments. Do you say take the mickey? But maybe they do take the mickey out of someone. I feel like they might say that.
I think so.
I found myself for almost one of the first times, despite having this podcast, culture wars and all those things, last night, really getting angry at the TV. And what had been being said on it, not the TV itself, but the Sky News following the riots that are happening right now. There's riots from the far right, but there are also riots from Muslim groups, right? And that's sort of being pushed down. And I'm not one for conspiracies at all, so I never go in the conspiracy lane. And I'm just watching, and I don't think there's an agenda necessarily. It's just people getting together in a group, and they're just saying this is the news, and they want to have a narrative maybe. And that narrative is, at the moment, these right-wing bigot, horrible people. And then and a lot of Muslims had to come out and defend themselves. And there's a little clip of, and black bandanas and things, bats and things. It's like, here is some defending themselves. This man accidentally seemed to have a bat in his hands, and that kind of thing. And I thought, wow, there really is a bit of an agenda. Why is that happening? And is that another example of what you said with the Orwell quote of people believing and eyes and things?
Well, there are thugs in our society and there are extremists in our society. So these riots have clearly been orchestrated to a considerable extent by racist ideologues, whatever, far right, just really nasty people. They hate foreigners. They want to go back to the 1950s. They're intolerant, dangerous people, and they've shown that they're violent. So that's the long and the short of it. However, there are thugs throughout our country and within our communities, and you have Islamism, extreme Muslim extremists, and we've seen all the sort of terror acts linked to this hateful ideology, which wants to basically destroy the West and kill infidels. And so neither is good. They're both really bad. And what would be nice is if the media could simply not have an agenda and just report on the fact that here are some far right thugs threatening, like, for example, trying to throw bricks at a mosque. I mean, it's disgusting and horrible and wrong. But could we have similar outrage for the peace marches every weekend post October the 7th, in which anti-Jewish slogans have been projected onto the Houses of Parliament? And I think it's exactly like the Last Supper. Can we just have some consistency, please? Can we just say that the calling for an intifada, which has happened on those peace marches every week, no precious few arrests for that. What are you calling for with an intifada? That means a holy war, suicide bombs on buses, on trains, and in shopping centres. How you can call for an intifada and not be arrested, literally inches from the mother of all parliaments, is beyond me. Well, that's where the two-tier policing thing comes from. And therefore, we just need to call out hate wherever it's found and violence, but we can't do that because everything's become so politicized, and sides have been taken.
There's fear now. Have we gotten to a point where we can't do anything but have a two-tier policing system, because to come down hard on that, maybe the militant Islamic side might just cause even more trouble?
Well, yeah, I mean, we sort of saw during those marches that cops more or less admitted that they wouldn't intervene because A, they were outnumbered, and B, this idea of inflaming community tensions or causing more trouble. And we saw a man who was described as, was it visibly Jewish, or he looked too Jewish or something? Yeah, and this was a police officer. By the way, we shouldn't attack the police really, because they're just trying to do their job and they're following instructions and they're trying to keep order. And their attitude is this guy who's wearing some apparel which is of related to the Jewish religion, and the copper's like, look, mate, it ain't worth the hassle. It ain't worth the trouble of you crossing the street here now, because it's all gonna kick off if you do. So I don't think the cop was being a horrible anti-Semite, but the cop, in a way, was revealing the problem with our modern society, which is that certain intolerances are tolerated and others are not. I wonder whether the genie is out of the lamp. I'm not sure it can go back in now.
You know what? I think that guy. I mean, my family's Jewish and all that, so I sometimes look at those things. And I think that guy I might be wrong about this. He might have actually sort of been doing it as he might be a YouTuber or a Twitter guy. So he was deliberately crossing the road there. But he is still making a point. It's a point why I should.
But also, why can't he?
Why can't he cross the road?
Even if he was, I mean, in a way, he'd be making a point which was illustrative of the problem.
That's right. There's a bit of a metaphor here of I think of, if you've got a couple of kids. Have you got kids?
Yeah, two.
When you got kids, I always think of that. Do you remember In Bruges where he says, "My cunt kids"? Have you seen In Bruges?
Yeah, it's a brilliant film.
I said the word I wasn't supposed to say. Gonna have to bleep that.
Do you want to pick it up or not?
I don't know. No, maybe we'll just bleep it. We'll bleep that. But Ralph Fiennes says it. It's just one of my favourite lines ever. Don't you talk about my C-word kids. But yes, kids, you might have one who's better behaved than the other. And so you'll often have to then prioritize the naughty one. You end up giving them more perks,
right?
Because you don't want them to cause a fuss. And it's not really fair on the one who's well behaved. And I suppose if that happens on a countrywide level enough times, I mean, with the BLM stuff and George Floyd, when that happened, people started going, okay, there's a lot of violent people in the streets in America right now, but let's look at what happened to get them to this point. Yeah. And on the progressive side, this time with the white working class right wing, if they are, there's no sort of, I wonder if maybe Keir Starmer saying, these people are the worst people. This was a day after a guy had just gone and stabbed children. Now that guy's got to be the worst rather than the guy people throwing bricks. Okay, terrible. Don't throw bricks. But stabbing children, that's worse. So is it a reaction to that to an extent?
Yeah, definitely. And Starmer's reaction to the riots has really been, it's been his first misstep as prime minister, really, because what you need someone to unite the country at that point. And instead he's picking sides and focusing on individual groups, which is, of course, in his muscle memory, it's identity politics. And that worked fine to posture in the way that he has was fine as leader of the opposition. But now he's prime minister. He is running an entire country, a whole nation of people with all different views and religions and backgrounds and everything. And I just feel that he's still in sort of woke leader of the opposition mode. And he's going to have to very quickly understand that he's the prime minister of the United Kingdom. He's been called out by Elon Musk today. Yeah, so probably be an old story by the time this goes out. But, Musk has basically humiliated him, saying, shouldn't you be concerned about all communities? And it's interesting that it takes a South African-born billionaire to kind of call out our own prime minister rather than figures from the opposition here.
We've got such it's so divided now that even the Daily Mail seemed to be siding with not with Musk there. It was sort of Musk called this weird Musk guy. Do you think there's an element, and I felt this again, maybe it's conspiratorial, watching Sky News last night, and GB News is included in this as well, I think, with my channel and Trigonometry and all of these kinds of alternative media, Joe Rogan, of course, at the top of that whole thing, Elon Musk, and then the old legacy guard. There's a feeling of those guys, these new guys are taking our jobs and taking our viewers.
Well, definitely, and challenging their ideology and their protection of the status quo. And the reason why the public are not happy with the status quo is because society is very divided. It's not working for people. You've got the priority. The main thing is cost of living, the unavailability of housing, GP waiting lists, school places. But you've also got society now, which is sort of very fractured, and you've got people living in parallel communities, not engaging with, not speaking the language very often, and just participating in British life in an active way, which is kind of what we need everybody to do. I'm a son of Irish immigrants myself, and my parents came over to the UK in the 1960s with a clear plan, which is to be British people. They remained Irish, very Irish, including the heavy drinking and
Has that passed down?
Of course, massively.
Okay.
I'm absolutely loaded today.
Yeah, we should have provided you with a stack of goodies.
My God. But, they kept their Irish identity and they kept their religion, Roman Catholics, but they participated in the project of this country, So I think all we're asking for, now, let's, not get into sort of finger pointing. And you look at, for example, British Muslims, vast majority of British Muslims have done exactly that. They are British. They participate in the great project that is the United Kingdom. And it's a wonderful thing. So, and Jews and Hindu and people that aren't religious. And so all we need is to be one nation again. So whatever religion you are, whatever background, you keep that, but you adhere to the fundamental founding principles of the country, which is the rule of law, fairness, decency, democracy, free speech, tolerance. And that is what is being tested by some people and some communities who will not adhere to those principles, or indeed angrily and violently work against them. And that's why the culture wars are not confected, why they're real, and why they must be won. And it's a cruel irony that the wokest prime minister in the history of this country has got 5 years now. So I don't see any progress on this.
I thought I had a bit of optimism, and I still do a little bit. And people shout at me about this because obviously we're all quite audience captured, and we don't like Keir Starmer because he's from the left and all of those things. But there was something about him that I thought he's just saying this woke stuff because he has to appease people. He seems quite sensible to me, but I think he's made a huge misstep already, and I think I might be utterly wrong.
Well, that's right. The hope was that the wokery and the virtue signaling was performative. And actually, to a certain extent, there may be hope for Starmer because he's come in and there's been a couple of things, they're certainly going to be quite careful with the economy and a lot less sort of left-wing economically than their supporters would like. So the 2-child benefit cap is an interesting test case. I mean, that is a very conservative, in inverted commas, right-wing policy, which is to cap benefits at 2 children. And it's amazing that he's kept that.
We also need more kids, don't we? Because we've got an aging population.
Well, we do, exactly. But that's in a way a sort of test case that Starmer can potentially have a bit of backbone because his own movement would love him to scrap the cap and he hasn't. And that tells you maybe a degree of fiscal responsibility, which is encouraging.
Yeah.
But B, maybe some political courage. But in the light of the riots, we've not seen that. He's gone straight back into this mode of just deciding who this week's approved victim group is.
Yeah. I like what you say about social cohesion and with your family. I had a similar thing being from a Jewish family. And I remember my dad was very proud to send me to a school. It was like a Church of England school, and that I had assimilated so much. He'd seen me playing rugby with like some sort of blonde Aryan children. I told this story once to David Baddiel as a point about like Jews assimilating him. My dad was very embarrassed and said this never happened. So I need to just say for legal reasons that my dad denies all of this, but I feel like he was sort of proud. Maybe it was a twinkle in his eye that I noticed that I was with these sort of big strapping people who look like you, Mark. It was rugby lads, and it was like this is assimilation. What a proud thing for him. He was able to, social mobility allowed him to get to a point where he could send me to this kind of posh school.
Well, this is it. I mean, in my point, and this will probably annoy some of the base listening to this show, watching it, which is that I believe passionately in diversity. Anything that's not diversity is really boring. Britain has always been diverse, going back to invasions from the French and the Spanish, the Germans and the Vikings. These shores have always been landed upon. And it's just a wonderful, heady mix. It is the most successful integrated society in the world, and it's all to play for. Britain is a great country, but it's just that there are these tensions, and it's the job of politicians to address them and tackle that. And the way you do it is very simple, which is that you adhere to a set of principles for the country. You bring the country together to follow those values that I mentioned, to be British and unite around that, which is something that Catherine Burble-Singh, Britain's strictest head teacher, has done at a school in Wembley called the Michaela Community School.
Former guest on here.
Right. Well, there you go. Now, her school is, I think, majority ethnic.
Yeah. 50% Muslim.
There you go. And they get these kids from deprived communities, and she gets them to Oxford. So poor families, they're skint, they've got hard lives, parents are holding down multiple jobs. It's often a chaotic domestic setting, because I've, spent a lot of time talking to her, watched that amazing documentary film about the school on Channel 4. But what happens when they get into the school? Well, there's sort of structure and discipline, and they are taught that they are British, and the flag is there for all to see. That the flag around which they unite is the United Kingdom flag, not the Palestinian flag or the Irish flag or the European flag. It is the British flag. And that creates a sense of belonging, a sense of membership of something, the greatest club in the world, of being British. And the woke left don't like that. And she's hated. I mean, there was a Labour-controlled local authority that wouldn't let her use a certain building to locate her school. They shall remain nameless. I've also forgotten. I don't want to say the wrong borough, but it was, she spoke openly about the fact that they'd found the perfect venue for the school when she needed a location, and they didn't like her politics. But this is a woman. This is why I get very cross with the woke left, is that this is a woman who, in a way, is trying to do exactly what socialism is all about, the left is all about when it's really virtuous, which is to help poor people and the working class and emancipate them and lift them and make their lives better. That's what the left is for.
Yeah.
But they seem to have forgotten about that. It's just like environmentalists have forgotten about pollution, and the left have forgotten about poor people.
I think for good reason. I'm just imagining a message in the future. Dear Andrew, why didn't you push back more when that so-called comedian said he likes diversity? That's going to be the thing. But I agree with you.
So Michaela's school, right? The kids that come out there are amazing. They're gonna have amazing careers. They're going to contribute to the economy and public life, and they are going to be Muslim and Catholic and all the rest of it. But they're going to be British, and that's what we need to do. But you see, with this anti-Western sentiment that suffuses now the culture, really, that's impossible. And all you're going to have is division. And, who is the biggest victim this week?
Yeah.
So what you do briefly is we all need to sort of unite around this project of Britishness, all of us, of all our different colours and religions, celebrate that. As I say, I love the diversity of London. I know that, again, that will trigger people. But what I don't like is if there is not participation in what being British is. And that's where diversity falls over. Where it doesn't fall over is the England football team, which is diverse, and they go and win football matches, and it brings the country together, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Sport is a clue of where we need to go to fix these problems. And the other thing, by the way, you need to do is you need to stop people entering the country illegally, because it's a humanitarian, economic, and national security disaster. And therefore, for Keir Starmer to not address that issue will mean that his problems will not only continue, but they will get worse. And the other issue is legal net migration. You need immigration. Any economist will tell you that you do. There's a skills gap, etc. But it's just about the amount. It's about the pace. And, you can pluck a figure out of thin air, maybe 100, 200K a year. You just do that forever. But current rates are impacting infrastructure, they're impacting social cohesion, and they make British people of all colours, races and backgrounds feel like precious resources to which they don't normally have access are being taken away from them. And it creates a sense of real injustice and anger. And Starmer would be, if he sorted out those two things, I think a lot of our problems would go away.
It's remarkable how nuanced your argument is, and yet I'm sure you must have encountered a lot of people just imagine you're a big horrible racist.
Not really. I don't think so. No. I think those terms are so meaningless now.
Well, yeah.
I'm pro-immigration and I'm pro-diversity. So it's
I suppose everybody's pro and anti-immigration. I mean, even people who say that they are complete, pro-immigration, there is a number, isn't there? Even if the number was 1 billion per year, that's the number where you're anti-immigration.
This is it. I mean, a glass of water, is good for you, and then 10 glasses of water will kill you. So it just needs to be.
Is that right?
Apparently so. Should we try? Should we do a viral video?
Go,
I mean, I hope this isn't all too terribly serious and everything, and but and this is not everything. This doesn't occupy my daily life, but I do wind up, because I've got a current affairs show. These issues come up time and time again.
Of course, and you explain why they're important issues and why the culture wars have to be won.
Yeah.
I mean, at the same time, I mean, it does feel like there's a reason that you say these things like social mobility, these things like what Catherine Birbalsingh is doing to help these people to actually settle into the UK. There's a
Why
reason.
isn't she a hero of the left?
She's exactly.
Why?
Well, I think that's what I'm going to hit on, because I think that a lot of the woke left has been hijacked by wealthy middle class people, much like myself, who went to a posh school, university, studied humanities, all of these things. Well, there's a lot of guilt that they have, but they want to stay at the top. The last thing they actually want is social mobility. Having a lot of immigration actually helps those people, because it undercuts the poorest classes, the poorest people. It undercuts them. Everything's cheaper, so it's easier for them to be able to afford those all the cheaper labor and things like that.
No, also I think the reason why that you've got people are sort of in Islington in lovely 4-bedroom houses saying, you know, open the borders, is that it's a virtuous position, which is very publicly held. Of course, normally they tweet about it, they tell their friends at dinner parties, and it enhances their social status. It's an ego trip, and they don't live with the consequences, because
but there's also a financial benefit though for them.
And I guess there is.
It makes social mobility is the opposite. That's an anathema to what is happening. More immigration like that, and especially unfettered or illegal, or when there's no social cohesion, it does create this huge gap. And then the middle classes. I mean, there's someone who came on called Batya Ungar Sargon, the American woman who wrote this book where she went around the States talking to the sort of working class people who were so anti woke, and they were just they believed in, hey, I'm going to work hard and have some social mobility. It seems like woke culture now doesn't want social mobility because it's not in their financial interest.
Maybe not. And there's that great Paul Embry book about, and he's a famous lefty himself, and a big trade unionist, and it's about how the modern left detest the working class. And Margaret Thatcher, for example. I mean, you're probably going to later come to some of sort of heretics I admire. She made a lot of mistakes. She did a lot of bad things, but the headline with Margaret Thatcher is that she actually emancipated the working class. She should be a hero of the left as well, really. She was voted for by working class people who had previously voted Labour. She had her own Boris Johnson-style political revolution. But the difference is that she did it 3 times with 3 election landslides, and she did it through policy. She actually delivered. She did a Boris Johnson-style promise to working class people. Boris, it was like levelling up, get Brexit done. Thatcher was like, we're going to basically get rid of the class system, and you can make anything of your life as long as you work hard and have talent. And so she emancipated the working class. And she said, look, you're in a council flat, so you're basically living in someone else's property of the state. And here are the rules about, where you can live and under what circumstances. Like, no, you can actually buy that place and it's your home. And then you can put a conservatory in it, or you can redecorate it, or you can sell it and then start a small business with the money, or et cetera, et cetera. But that was her predominant, her great legacy was the massive expansion of the middle class and the emancipation of the working class. I mean, we don't talk about the class system as much as we did. And I think it's because Thatcher got rid of it. And to be fair to Tony Blair, he continued that legacy. And New Labour, I voted New Labour for my sins, because I felt that they maintained that idea of aspiration. And making something of your life. I don't know how we got onto Thatcher, but
I think it's the bitterness of certain what we'd call the liberal elite, I suppose now. But there's always just that sort of upper middle class. I don't think they want that social the cohesion. They don't want social mobility. They don't want aspiration among the working class. They want them to feel you're a victim. You're down there.
You. Well, you see that in America with white liberals, rich white liberals, being very racist by framing people of color as victims. And it's amazing how they can't see the eye-watering racism in which they're indulging. And they call everyone racist. They find racism everywhere except where it actually is, which is looking at them in the mirror. Perfect example. Was it a politician, a Democrat politician, who said that black people don't even know what a computer looks like or something?
I'm going to look up who that was. I remember that as well. Wasn't that?
It
was
someone.
It was a big... Wasn't it Biden or something?
No, I didn't think it was Biden, but it was definitely a sort of, I think it was a leading Republican politician, maybe a senator or something, but that's wild.
New York governor said this, Kathy Hochul.
Okay.
Well, there you go.
She's had a mayor there.
Yeah, she has.
I don't see anyone as a victim, by the way.
Mm. What about
what I would do, by the way? You know, my I think I need to be prime minister. My big thing is, just to go back to it, is it's so simple, is nationhood. So you bring in all different cultures, united around the vision of nationhood and this country's values, which most people do anyway, but the tensions is those who don't. And then the other thing that I would do is I would focus on poverty. So whatever happened to worrying about poverty? Because now, you know, so identity politics means it's like, well, this group, this is I don't know, women of color who are gay and trans or something. And why don't we just go back to poor people are the priority and then we work backwards from there?
Yeah. Well, that would be wonderful.
Why isn't poverty the main metric for social concern? And why isn't it that against the expense of everything else? So if you look at, I hate skin color. If you talk about skin color, it's just so wrong anyway. But if you're going to play that game, you know, why aren't poor white boys going to university? Well, because they're white. It's not in the national political conversation. But I'd forget all of that. And I would just say, yeah, we're not even going to talk about skin color anymore. We are going to focus on poor people and help them. And I think you'll find that poor people come from all backgrounds and of all skin colors and of all religions and etc.
Well, like I say, I don't think it suits certain people to focus on that aspiration of the poorest people because they don't want to be usurped.
Yeah.
Like they want to keep people down there, keep prices low, all those kinds of things. It's fear that those other people. So they focus on all sorts of things that can't really be fixed. I don't know. You were infamously tore up a mask on live on TV. Tell me about that because it caused quite a hoo-ha.
Right. Yeah. I'll be honest with you. COVID is really what shaped my outlook forevermore.
Because before that,
you could say it radicalized me, but I don't really want to say it radicalized me because the idea of being radicalized is somehow that you've been brainwashed or you've kind of basically been seduced by some sort of ideology or religion.
Red pills.
So yeah, so maybe it's woke me up. It's a better one, but then you'd sound like a nutter on the internet.
Woke me up. Here's my mask torn into pieces.
Yeah.
No, but I know. Yeah, go on.
Essentially, you know, I don't have a background in journalism, and that's my superpower as a journalist and broadcaster. Because I haven't been trained to think in a certain way. All I do is I read capaciously. And for example, every day when I prepare my show, I read all of the newspapers. I think if those on the right don't read The Guardian, then that is their Achilles heel. They are weak. And on the left, if you don't read The Telegraph or The Mail, then you basically, you're vulnerable.
Yeah.
You know, the way you win is to absorb and look at all the arguments and then process the answer as you see it. And I did that with COVID, which is that the masks, I mean, look, I don't need to tell you, do I? We were told not to wear masks. We were told that they're useless. We had 4 decades of studies into masks saying that the only thing they really did is they were good for surgeons doing open heart surgery so that they didn't dribble or drop snot into the open wound. Right. And that's what the surgical mask is. And no doctor thinks that the blue surgical mask is stopping viruses passing through. So it's quite amazing. Jenny Harries, one of the top medical advisors in the country, said, you know, these things are probably counterproductive. It's in you're touching it with your hands, you're spreading it. So we were told that they were no good and useless and don't use one. And then suddenly a decision was made that we absolutely had to have them and they were amazingly effective. And that was the point where, like, well, then that's a lie. I mean, I'm no genius. I'm not a trained journalist. I don't know what my IQ is. I'm not a wizard. I'm not a maestro. But I can just outline the basic facts, which is that we were told not to wear these. Now we have to. And there's no data that backs up their effectiveness. And I had engineers. I had a former stage advisor on my show who's an aerosol engineer. And he just said, I don't think the medical establishment understand the scale of what we're talking about here. That the holes in those masks are between 500 and 1,000 times larger than the virus itself.
Wow.
We know about countries that masked and others that didn't had the same COVID outcomes. There were no mask mandates in Sweden. They've got the lowest COVID excess deaths. Sorry, no, the lowest excess deaths in Europe from 2020 to 2023. so it just didn't stack up. And I was on the radio, and I've got a current affairs show on Drive Time on Talk Radio, and I've got to talk about stuff. And I'm like, this doesn't make sense to me. And I've looked for the data around where the masks are effective and and the contradictions of being told not to wear one. Now we've got to, and it was clearly, the masking was clearly naked politics. Okay. It was politicians covering our faces to cover their backsides. It was performative. What I think occupied policymakers at the time was, oh my God, this could be a disaster. So we have to do everything we can so that in the years ahead, they'll look back and go, oh, well, at least they got people to wear a mask. At least they did social distancing. So it was all a big insurance policy for the political class that, it's like in the supermarket, there's a spillage and they put like the yellow little triangle thing there, although that actually does have a function because the floor is wet. Yeah. But anyway, so it was quite obvious to me that the mask stuff was nonsense. And I called it out and I wrote a monologue about it. And, we're in a very visual medium these days, and Talk Radio at the time was indulging in video as well. They had a Twitter feed and they're on YouTube. So I was, I think, quite an early adopter at Talk Radio of really using the visuals, even though it's the radio, but like, well, this is going out as a video as well. So I'm doing the whole thing to camera. And I decided at the end, the first thing I was going to do is I was going to chuck the mask at the camera at the end again. The last thing we'll do, if we're going to save lives and get the country back to normal, we've got to get rid of these anti-scientific, filthy, disgusting, useless nonsense masks. And I was going to just chuck it at the camera. But my excellent producer said, wait a minute, why don't you cut it up?
Wow.
Yeah. So he went and got some scissors. It's a great example of collaboration. I'm a great believer in collaboration.
Me too.
He took my crazy idea and brought it up a level.
They say the camel is a horse by design, but the camel's pretty useful.
Oh, absolutely.
I like the
Who
camel.
knew?
I love camels.
Do you?
Well, I just love what they do. I mean, they're ugly, horrible things.
Yeah.
But a horse wouldn't survive in the desert.
I know. This is exactly it. So I chopped up the mask. It went out. It immediately went viral. And why did it go viral? Because it was true.
Possibly. And sensationalist cutting.
Yeah. But it was obviously, so what I've done is I've taken, see, my currency when I broadcast is the truth. That's my currency. That's what I'm looking for. Now, I will not always get there. I will take one step forward and two steps backwards in my pursuit of the truth. But I've never knowingly ever said anything that wasn't true. I think where I've maybe come unstuck a bit in the past is perhaps overinterpreting things, which I think is you've got to be really careful in my field not to overinterpret things. So remember there was one story about 15-minute cities, and I sort of overinterpreted it as a potentially sort of authoritarian thing. Is it a prelude to further sort of, climate lockdowns, And looking back on it, I slightly regret that because, I mean, that, by the way, may come to pass. It may be true. But I didn't have any really good reason to know that was the case. Principle, you're trying to cut down on congestion, pollution, and a lot of people would find it quite convenient to have a newsagent or a little convenience store within 15 minutes. But that's literally, if I look back on sort of years and years of broadcasting, and that might be one where I just would have tweaked my interpretation and said some people are concerned that a future authoritarian government might leverage 15-minute cities to their own ends. Fine. But the rest of it, I'm just led by what I see, what I hear, what I feel. And I just put it out there. So, but then what I do is, because I'm also a comedian and an entertainer, I sort of add a little kind of theatrical frisson to it.
Well,
hence the chopping up of the mask. But look, when that mask video came out, it went viral. It was a global news story. And I was chatting about it with the family. I actually showed it to my immediate family members, and they laughed when they saw it at the end because it was quite funny. And my brilliant boss at Talk Radio, who stood by me all the way, he said, if you get any pushback, just say, look, it was tongue in cheek.
Yeah. Which
was a brilliant point. And it was really, because it was a sort of provocative. But my main point still stands. And I had about a day or two where I was slightly worried about it, going, is my career over now? Because it seems trivial now, but at the time it was a big deal.
Someone quit, didn't they?
Well, a colleague of mine on Talk Radio claims that he quit in disgust. But I mean, first of all, people in broadcasting, It's really hard to get your own radio show. People don't just give up radio shows because they're unhappy with what someone else has done. My interpretation of that is I'm not sure what status he enjoyed at the station or what kind of long-term future he had. So I don't know about that. Don't know whether
it's good to take a stand sometimes when you're thinking of leaving anyway.
Yeah, or even are you going to be, are your services even wanted in the long term? I don't know. I won't necessarily be led on that, but it struck me as it defies credibility that somebody with their own radio show with their name in the title is going to quit because one of their colleagues cut up a mask in protest at the illogicality of the mask mandate. Basically, that was I think it was phony, but I mean, if I have that much power, then that's amazing. I feel buzzing that I have that much influence.
I feel like quitting just from speaking to you. There is some people say about the mask that I've got a friend who's a big lung doctor guy, and I sort of go to him for this stuff, and he said it can on a large scale make a slight difference, and some people think it can. I've got a fact check thing here just to
good. You should, and this is what I embrace.
Yeah, well, I know you do, which is good. So, despite the size difference, masks are effective at stopping the transmission of the virus because they block respiratory droplets and aerosols, which are much larger than the virus itself, and not the primary means of transmission. Now, as my friend said, the problem is you're touching it all the time.
But also, COVID wasn't spread through aerosols. That's the thing. It wasn't droplets that gave you COVID. It's just through the air. It's that's the point, is that things, if you're spitting, go hello sleep, the mask will stop that. But I just point to Florida in America that didn't have mask mandates, and they had the same comparable COVID outcomes as California. And you know what then? I mean, in a spirit of, and not to contradict myself, I'm willing to imagine that there might have been some tiny, minuscule benefit from the masks, maybe. I don't know. Perhaps behavioral as well. It was certainly, there was a big element of what's the word when you the behavioral psychology, wasn't that it? Yeah. Who of course, SAGE was populated in part by scientists who were there to sort of alter our behavior in order to stop COVID spreading. Dr. Susan Michie, etc. But the point is that you cannot mandate something that is not definitively effective.
That's the issue. I agree with you.
You made people wear something around which, and I think your colleague friend there would agree, around which was debatable.
My friend did agree with that, and so he said, I think it can be spread through droplets as well, But I think your point stands. I mean, the issues were you end up touching it a lot.
But it's like the seasonal flu or whatever. You and I are in a room. If I've got it, you're going to get it.
Yeah.
Especially COVID turns out was quite transmissible.
Yeah.
Who knew?
Who knew? I agree on a large scale.
I mean, what it is, it's like lockdowns. Show me a country that didn't lock down where everyone died.
Yeah.
Which is that country? The countries that were like wildly anti-lockdown, they should be hanging their heads in shame. Which are those countries? What about states in America that just in a cavalier way ignored COVID, like Texas and like Florida? The graph exactly the same, and of course we've got Sweden, and it's Sweden performed better than its Scandinavian neighbours.
I think the other argument to that, of course, was these are large countries with very few people in them, bigger spaces between the people.
Right, but the Scandinavian countries are very similar, and Sweden outperformed them too. Didn't have mask mandates, and they didn't have.
I'm on your side with it. I mean,
and I appreciate but that was it. So COVID became the template for my entire approach now, which is that I'm not going to listen to what the government say and just swallow it as fact. I'm not going to allow mantras like follow the science to actually trump the actual science. I'm interested. It's like net zero, right? I believe the planet's clearly heating up. I want us to get the temperatures down, etc. But I see now, I'm concerned about the direction of travel with the push for net zero because it reminds me of COVID. Because again, these mantras, you're a bad person if you question it. It seems to involve destroying the economy, which was the same as COVID. How's that played out for you?
Yeah.
Country's ruined now. We tried to stop a virus, which we didn't stop, and everyone got anyway. And I'm a bit concerned about the net zero stuff. Again, it doesn't make some of it doesn't make sense. China polluting massively, and then we're going to bankrupt ourselves. So I actually believe in net zero, but just smart net zero, sensible, evidence-based. And if we'd done that during COVID, I don't think we'd have had the economic and societal damage that we did.
Yeah.
Because if you'd listened to evidence-based scientists such as Carl Hennigan from Oxford University, then I think we would have had far fewer harms.
Yeah.
So it drives everything. That's it now. And I'm not going to take anything as on face value anymore, and I will question it. And that's what I do every day.
Yeah. I was the biggest anti-masker out there. I couldn't bear it, and got shouted at by my wife all the time because I think more just because of the social shame when you're the only one in the airport not wearing one, and then it's like you're trying to show off almost.
I think it's the biggest scam in history. I can't lie. I mean, tell me why the masks work, but in the UK, did you know that if you had a scarf, that counted as a mask?
No, I didn't.
So they didn't even specify what a mask was. So if you covered your face with a scarf, that fulfilled your obligations to respect the mask mandate. So, and in Germany, they only accepted, so the blue surgical mask is the one that we had. In Germany, they were not accepted as a correct mask. So you couldn't get on a train in Germany with a blue surgical mask. Those are the ones that all the really good people here who are very kind were wearing. Yeah. Because they're better people than you and me.
I was in Germany.
Right.
That's why I was living
so
at the
you
time.
I remember a family member was sent off a train because they had the wrong kind of mask. It's like, you cannot get on the, so it was the FFPP or whatever.
It's white. It was a sort of white one.
Yeah. That's it. But then Germany did not enjoy any better outcomes from COVID than anyone else. So, make it make sense.
I get that there are other sides. I get that my lung doctor friend has got so, but for me, what I found incredible was that even if we are to take, okay, maybe it might have helped on some level to delay it long enough so that the NHS could sort of survive, whatever. Even if we just accept that, yeah, exactly. Then I couldn't bear that there was just this. We have to be happy about it. That nobody could have even say like, "No, we got to wear this," but bloody hell, is it annoying? Bloody hell, it removes any kind of personal relations between people. Kids will grow up just seeing a mask on a face. No one cared.
If there was evidence that the mask blunted or stopped COVID, I wouldn't have done that video. The only other thing I would say to you is that it set a very dangerous precedent. Sorry we're spending so long on this, but I think it relates to the entire conversation we're having, which is that the mask mandates were illiberal. Yeah. I mean, it's worth reminding yourself that on the back of, let's be polite, debated evidence. Should we say that? Should we make a peace deal on the masks and say debated evidence?
I think let's do that.
On the
I'm
back
not some
of
like massive pro.
exactly.
I don't want to give.
No, that's what I want to be fair. Yeah. So on the back of debated evidence, the state covered our faces on and off for 2.5 years. I mean, let that sink in that we allowed our faces to be covered by the state. That's a pretty dark place. And by the way, that's before you even get to the low fatality rate of the virus itself. So we're being forced to wear masks, which by the way is not good for your health, and they are environmentally catastrophic.
Yeah, and socially.
Yeah, and also great for criminals. So you're forced to wear a mask that where it's really hard to find the evidence that this is some amazing barrier to COVID, and it's not good for your health, and so that was, I mean, I can't believe people went along with it, and it reached the point where children in classrooms were wearing them all day long.
Yeah,
and that for me is copper-bottomed child abuse, because if you are masking children all day and you don't have like solid evidence that it's going to stop the spread, and they've looked at masks in schools since then and found that it had no impact. So, if we're getting to the point where, I mean, have you seen the videos in America of toddlers being masked at nursery and in tears?
Horrible.
So therefore, that video of the mask is something that I thought might somehow come back to bite me or haunt me. And it's now probably arguably my proudest 30 seconds on earth.
It's probably the best thing you've ever done.
Yeah, well, what you know what it did? It taught me to push back against the accepted narrative. It taught me to trust my instincts, my eyes, my ears, and my common sense. And it's 2024 now, and I don't think it's aged too badly.
Speaking, you mentioned abuse of children. Did you ever meet Huw Edwards in a TV career or anything like that?
Well, I have not met Huw Edwards, no. And that's the most appalling, evil crime. And I wonder whether it's traumatic for the country, by the way, because, I mean, the victims is all that matters. But what I mean is that this is a guy that was in our living rooms every night for like decades. It's a real it's a real, it's, you know, all the BBC archive, the weddings, the royal weddings, election nights, he's got his face in there.
Queen's death.
Yeah, Queen's death. So it's a shocking stain on our history, really.
Yeah. And did you see that video of him sort of telling people, I think it was actually meant for trainees or something, make sure to trust these people and don't ever trust who's talking to you. Did you see that video? There was
I do remember that.
Yeah.
I do remember that. He was in the news studio doing it, wasn't he?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, what is there to say about that? I mean, just in the most evil crime, and it's such a shock. But then again, I think that we live in a society where these things are happening, and it's celebrities and it's ordinary people, and it's the worst thing imaginable, isn't it?
It is. It is. And I think it's just, it's another sort of nail in the coffin of trust for a mainstream broadcaster, because I think you're right, it's trauma for the nation, because he was probably the most trusted face on TV. And we're already feeling that we don't trust a lot of mainstream TV presenters. And that's just...
Yeah. I mean, I'll be honest with you, I find it hard to get cross with establishment media based upon Huw Edwards, because I just think it's an individual that did really bad things. And I think that if you've got, let's say, a factory and one of the guys in there, Phil, has committed that crime, I wouldn't really judge the factory or the employers or the industry. There is a bit of a conversation to be had about whether the BBC sat on the story for too long and kept him on full pay, et cetera, et cetera. I suspect that they were contractually a bit bound because of, they were worried, I think, about his mental health, and they thought he might top himself or something. So I think legally they were in a bit of a bind there. But I think, I don't think that you can link the Huw Edwards scandal to the lack of credibility of establishment media. Because Huw Edwards could have just been a big star on Sky News or in any GB News, any platform. And it would be wrong, I think. I think it's wrong to judge a business or an industry based upon the actions of an individual. Where establishment media has a case to answer is somewhere else away from Huw Edwards. And it's about not doing what I try to do, which is to be led simply by the truth and giving people information.
Yeah.
Now, to be fair, it's plus opinion. So my show is, the newsreader tells you what's happening and I give you my view, but my view is formed from looking at the facts and giving you my honest verdict and including arguments that contradict my arguments within the piece. And I don't think you get that in establishment media. I think you get a lot of one note coverage of certain stories, and I think you get narratives.
Yeah.
It goes back to COVID. We had a narrative from ITV, the BBC, Sky, which is that lockdowns will save lives. Every press conference, all of the political journalists were pressing the Prime Minister as why he didn't lock down sooner, why he's not going to lock down again. And they took it as a mantra that lockdowns equals saving lives. Well, a journalist shouldn't do that, because like masks, where was the data to back up the idea that lockdowns would stop COVID? So a peer-reviewed study came out after the first lockdown showing that cases of COVID were falling before the first lockdown. Now I forgive and I understand the government for panicking and doing that first lockdown, because they just thought everyone's going to die, and the modeling, the junk modeling from Imperial College was so bad that it looked like this would just be mass casualties. But the problem is, a bit like the masks, once we yielded to having our faces covered, that was it. The tyranny was, And the same thing with the lockdowns. Once you did 3 weeks to flatten the curve, the die was cast. So anyway, so the establishment media is not trusted because since COVID, people had to go to Joe Rogan and elsewhere for sort of coverage of vaccines, masks, lockdowns, where they felt they were getting a more balanced appraisal. And people can tell when they're being lied to.
Some can.
I suppose.
I wonder if the TV, like, as you say, I think it's an example of a camel. I was saying a camel is good compared to a horse sometimes to have lots of collaboration. But when the camel's that large, you've got a lot of individuals in it who just have to stick to what's right because there's too much social stigma. They don't want to get away from or get in trouble. And then you go down these. And so I think there's a lot of incentive within these big organizations to stick to one narrative. And that's what's scary. I've got one more question for you. But first, tell me, where can people get your show?
Oh, that's so nice of you. So Mark Dolan tonight is Saturday and Sunday every weekend, 9 till 11, 9 p.m. to 11. Starts with The Big Opinion, which is clues in the title. And that'll be the big story of the day, where I dissect the facts, give people broad sort of array of information, and then my verdict, my view. By the way, immediately joined by people that disagree and call me a plonker.
Great.
Just a while ago, I had an excellent journalist on who's on the left, and he said, Mark, that monologue has already collapsed under the weight of its own rhetoric, which I thought was a great line.
Yeah.
So I love the pushback. I'm one of those presenters I love to get shouted at and being disagreed with. So Mark Dolan tonight is the home of diverse opinion. And the more people disagree with me, the better it is. A, because it's more balanced debate, and B, I think it's better telly as well. Mm-hmm. So I do that. And I also do a little show on a Friday called Friday Night Live, which is more of a lighthearted, gut-felt type show. Okay. And that's 8 till 9. So that's that. And then I've got a cheeky podcast, which represents a completely different part of my personality. And it's called The Mark Dolan Way. And it's a self-help / humor podcast. Who are my heroes? Well, I'm going to power through these.
Yeah. Okay. Because we've got a bit of a...
I know, I feel bad. I feel I've waffled on. I think it's going to need a big edit.
You've waffled brilliantly. We're not going to edit it.
Are you sure? So, ever since I was 11, I've been obsessed with Elton John.
Wow.
Obsessed with Elton John. He is... First of all, he was my subject in Mastermind, which I think is proof that you're obsessed with someone. He was my specialist subject. Got all the answers right. I got more right answers than Elton John would have got.
I bet. Well, I'm from Watford, so I used to hear his gigs from Watford Stadium nearby.
I'm obsessed with Elton John. Yeah. And by the way, these days, I think he wouldn't like me.
Who knows what he can't be woke, can he?
I think he's a bit woke, but I don't care.
Do you think that's because he's gay? Because a lot of gay people aren't.
No, it's not gay. No, I know loads of anti-woke gay men.
Yeah. What do you think about Simon Amstel? Do you think he's woke? I want to get him on the show.
It's a good question. You must get him on the show. I don't know. He's a genius. I know that much.
He's so funny.
I doubt it. I think
can't be woke, can he?
I'm very disappointed about modern comedians are just whatever happened to challenging the establishment.
I just don't get me started.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
So anyway, but I got dogs abuse from comedians about the mask.
Yeah,
so you're quite a fan of unscientific tyranny, are you? Is that the latest hill to die on as a comedian?
Yeah.
And by the way, also that the comedians, do you remember what I was saying earlier about the woke left are abusive because they tell you the abuse isn't happening? Yeah. The number of comedians that say there's no cancel culture is quite amazing.
Don't get me started.
So anyway, no, Elton John can do no wrong. So basically, I just think that I cannot believe this career, which has seen the output of some of the finest music written since the Beatles, really. I think Elton John and Bernie Taupin are up there with the Beatles. If you look at Rocket Man, sorry seems to be the hardest word, Candle in the Wind, the list goes on. I just think it's unbelievable, timeless classics and the sheer volume of it. I think he's been a heretic, I
love that.
He in 1976, he came out as gay. His management said, you will stop selling records if you say you're gay. And he went, I don't care. And then when he did the interview, they said, why have you decided to reveal your sexuality? And he said, oh, no one's ever asked me before. His honesty is amazing. And I think it's quite heretical, to be honest. And so fearless. And being bald and just getting out there and playing and the thick glasses and everything. It's all out there. This authentic self. And also the sort of rebellious thing, and that's it. But otherwise, briefly, wonderful heretics, Steve Jobs.
Yeah.
Who decided that you're going to pay 5 times the amount for your phone than you currently are, and you'll be grateful for it, and there will be no instruction manual. He was so hilarious. When the iPhone 4 had a problem with if you held it in a certain way, the antenna didn't work. He issued a press release saying, don't hold it like that. There was no product recall or apology. It was, don't hold it like that. I love this man. He broke all the rules. He reinvented the retail store.
That's right. Yeah.
He reinvented the consumption of music, originally through iTunes and then ultimately Apple Music. He reinvented the personal computer.
And he was bald as well.
And he was another baldy.
That's amazing.
So Jobs, what's he called from Ryanair? Michael O'Leary.
Is he bald too?
No, he's a feisty Irishman. Yeah. He, for example, no F's are given.
No, I know.
This is what I'm looking for in a heretic, is no F's are given.
Yeah.
And he decided to have an airline. Do you know, you're young, right?
Yeah.
It was expected that you would get a meal on a plane. That was standard, is a hot meal on a plane. And he's like, I'm not feeding you. Yeah. You're buying your lunch. People couldn't believe it. And then he's like, oh, and you know that bag, you're going to pay for that. People didn't used to pay for bags. He invented that.
Yeah.
Him and EasyJet, but he was a bigger. So breaks the rules and goes, yeah. You're going to come on a plane, and I'm going to. I mean, he allegedly tried to get people to pay to have a wee on the plane as well. I don't know. That may
I've
be
seen
apocryphal.
him speak about that. I saw him.
Was it true?
I think he said it was something they were looking into. The thing is that there's another way to frame it, isn't it? Which is I'm going to bring down, because everyone says, what a greedy bastard, he's making you pay for bags. But he could put it as, no, I'm bringing the price down. I'm looking at things you don't need, which is you don't need, and so on. Anyway, those are some great heretics. People, please go and check out Mark Dolan, all his stuff. I put the links to his amazing sounding podcast and his show and all of those things. Follow on X and all of those things. He's been wonderful.
Can I salute you for the work you do?
Oh, thank you so much.
Because all you're doing is what I try to do, which is have open conversations with no agenda. Just ask people what they think, and they're not afraid of being cancelled for saying it.
Oh, well, thank you so much. Well, look, I'm so pleased we bumped into each other. I was so happy you even knew who I was. So that was really nice.
Vice versa.
It's come on, Mark Dolan.
Would you like to make love?
Yeah, well, again.
The thing is, I'm not gay, but I am trapped in a loveless marriage, and any attention's welcome. It's not really a sex thing. It's just intimacy. I just want to be held.
God. Yeah, well, we'll do that again after. I had an hour with you before, but we'll try that. But people, go, please hit the like button. Follow Mark's stuff. He's been wonderful. So please do go over there, click on all the things, and keep watching this channel as well.